Am I good to go? All
Yes.
right, good morning. Welcome to the Personnel Board meeting from Monday, December 16th, 2024. It is 8:31 a.m. All three members are present, and we will go to public comment first. I'm seeing none. So we'll keep going. We will skip item 3 until the moderator joins us and go to item 4, which is administrative business. First is approval of the meeting minutes from November 19th, 2024. Were there any questions or comments on these? Seeing none, I'll move that we accept them as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Dorian,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and I am aye as well. Next is employee transition report. Vanessa?
So just wanted to report that we have recruited and appointed a new Youth and Family Service Program Coordinator. Her name is Emily Bredeau, and she'll start on January 6th. And she takes the place of Shannon Kinnaman, who had been with the department for about 6 or 7 years.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
And there is Paul. So I'm going to pause, let him get on audio.
Hello.
Morning, how are you?
Morning, folks. Good.
Is it just me or does he seem very far away?
For me?
Yeah, your audio. I just want to make sure. Is that me or everyone else can hear him well?
It's a little distant. Can you sit a little closer, Paul?
I don't know if that's what it is, because
That's
my,
better.
is that better?
That's better. All right.
This.
That was a lot better.
Yeah, because my machine is behind me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm sitting, I sort of sit back because that's where all the. I'll just talk loud.
All right.
That's the problem.
Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's always nice to have you with us, especially when we're talking about particularly important topics in terms of what our composition looks like. Obviously, you are our appointing authority. And what I thought I would do for purposes of today is really just frame it in the current. And then we can talk about the future, once we get through the current. But as you're aware, we've had one opening for quite a while. And we unfortunately now have a second opening with Michelle's resignation about a month ago. And I know you and I have had a chance to talk, but obviously it's important for the board to hear it directly from you and have a discussion like this in public. Is, much like many other boards and committees in this town, I think we are struggling to hit a quorum, right? It takes Dorian, John, and myself to get here for us to even have a meeting. And, that in and of itself is a challenge. And then we obviously have avenues we can pursue through amendments to the bylaw at town meeting to adjust our quorum requirements. But, certainly our views are important, but you are the appointing authority. So I think it's important for you to weigh in on whether you would even support or how you would approach a quorum, a potential change for the number of members to meet quorum here, and or any recruitment efforts that you have ongoing. And I would also pause because I know there was a little bit of a homework assignment to understand whether the personnel board has always been 5 members. So I don't know, Vanessa, if you were able to figure that out through any research before we let Paul weigh in with just kind of his thoughts and commentary.
Sure. I've gone back, several decades looking in the annual town reports and so forth, and haven't seen anything on any smaller size board.
So I first of all, Jason, thanks for inviting me. And let me start by saying everybody on this call looks fabulous. Like people have like their hair done, they look good, they're got good color. I mean, I don't even, I'm like ashamed that I'm like in the winter mode here. And you guys all look great, so, good on you for that. What I'm, okay, so now getting back to, uh, personnel board, the number, and what I'm curious about also, and I don't know if anybody knows anything about this or we could find it out. But what was, I think it's important, in my mind, it's important to understand at least a little bit, if we can, about what precipitated its existence in the first place. Like, when was it formed? Why? Who did it? Right? Was it created by town meeting? Was it created by, well, it had to be created by town meeting because it's, you know, personnel bylaws and bylaw. But how long ago was that, right? And again, and is a personnel board a prescribed body in every, you know, in every town in Massachusetts? Is it just something that some towns have and others don't? I mean, I should know the answer to these things, but obviously it's never come up. And I wondered what the answer is to those questions and, you know, relatedly, whether it's even something we have the ability to figure out. Because to me, when you talk about changing a political body, the original reasons it exists are relevant to considering that. Do those reasons still exist today? You know, do they exist even more? They're less, different, whatever. You know, I've never been a proponent of continuing to do something just because that's the way we've always done it, right? But on the other hand, there might be a good reason for that. So that's my I took too long to say what's a pretty, I don't know, I think it's a pretty simple thought process there.
So let's break that down into a few components. First, Mark, can you weigh in on just in general how this works in other cities and towns, and you know, realizing that you're not the town administrator in other towns, but just knowing what your peers go through in terms of working with personnel boards, not working with personnel boards. And then I can probably layer on based on a conversation I had with Kate Federoff as our labor counsel.
Yeah, Jason, a lot of the my peers have, you know, more authority than I do. And if the position, whether it's a manager or a town administrator, it's driven by charter. In the positions where those positions have more personnel responsibilities vested with them, there are no personnel boards, or personnel boards are simply policy driven. They focus more just on policy rather than any of the administrative pieces, such as your board does. So it's a little more, you know, like I said, it really depends on the charter. But in, you know, other communities where the administrative position is similar to mine, it's going to work similar to how it work or doesn't work here. So it's going to be somewhat similar.
So Mark, you're saying that it's more a function of, it's like, to me, it's a chicken and egg here, right? Does the administrator or manager in other towns have more or less authority depending on the personnel board, or does the existence of a personnel board follow from an administrator or manager having more or less authority? Does that make sense?
No, sorry. A manager, a manager having more or less authority would be driven by the charter, not by the personnel board.
No, understood,
Okay.
but so do
Lost
we
your-
think when the charter was like you know, ground zero of this question of authority. And then both the power of the manager slash administrator and or personnel board flowed from the charter.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, look, every community does a little bit different too. It's
Right.
not that you get a charter, you automatically do this. It depends on, how a community wants to structure something.
Okay, but we've had when did we first get a personnel board versus when did we first get a town administrator?
I actually wrote to Amy to look at that date. I couldn't figure it out through my other records. We have asked the clerk's office to check on the original creation date. I also wanted to note that the role of the personnel board is defined in Mass General Law in chapter 41, section 108C. So it doesn't talk about the number or people or to that detail. So that might have been defined in our first bylaw, but it's governed by a general law.
Does 108C require a personnel board?
I'll go back and review that.
But that's all right, I can do it. And look, guys, I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass for the sake of it. I think these are some of the very same kinds of things that you'd be confronted with if there was any kind of process or effort to change what we have currently. Whether that would be, in front of town meeting or the select board or whatever it might be. These are likely to be the kind of questions people ask, can we change it? Why would we change it? Why do we have it in the first place? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think the important thing is this discussion is in its infancy.
Yeah.
Right? And this would be something that, I would not rush discussion on, but I think there are two fairly important things that we do need to resolve before the April annual. One, how confident are you in your recruitment abilities to find people that would be creative and balancing to the current composition of the personnel board, that we may actually be able to fill these seats? Like, we obviously don't have visibility to the conversations that you have. I think that's question one. And question two, if your answer to that is it's been a struggle, I think the question I would then have is, do you as moderator have a strong view on us proposing, at least for next year, right? And this can be changed anytime you have a town meeting and someone puts a bylaw in front of everyone, changing the quorum to 3 as opposed to 5 until we can get into a better recruitment plan and have a more comprehensive discussion that will involve select board and others about what personnel can and should be as we go into the future.
So if I understand, well, I can easily answer the first one, but let me just clarify the second one. Changing the quorum, right now the quorum is 3, right? Quorum is 3 out of 5?
Yeah.
Okay, so presumably you're talking about changing it to 2 out of 3?
Well, we'd be changing the membership to 3, so you'd have 3 spots to appoint. And I'm obviously not advocating to go up, and going to 4 does nothing from a quorum perspective. So
then your quorum is 2.
correct.
So, all right. So to answer your first question, struggle is probably a fair word, right? As a lot of you know on this call, my philosophy as the moderator in terms of who I appoint to this board or to the advisory committee is to be, to the extent I can, and it used to be easier, to appoint folks that are both a creative, balanced, willing to work and collaborative with the current board, so that to use a euphemism, I'm not throwing just any warm body at an empty seat. Okay, that has been harder and harder. There's no question about that. Between now and April, is there a chance I can fill both slots? I guess there's always a chance. I don't view it as likely. I view it as much more likely I can fill one more. I had somebody, or I almost had somebody, and to fill Barry's spot, who, had agreed to do it and then decided they couldn't do it, and they might be able to do it down the road and to come back to them, all right? So, that's the kind of environment we're working in, I'm working in. To your question, Jason, about, do I have a sort of an immediate thought on the proposition of reducing the composition of the board from 5 to 3? I don't. Meaning I don't have a strong feeling either way. Sort of pending again, what chapter 108C might tell me, which I will go and read after this call. But in a vacuum, I don't have a strong feeling either way. I'm curious to hear what the other members have to say about that. Given that the change will obviously most directly impact you and Dorianne and John.
So let's go to John and Dorianne. Either you have any strong views?
I think the question really is, well, here go my lights. Why can't we fill the other 2 seats?
I should have said this already, just now. We have an overall, Southborough, the town of Southborough, and I think Massachusetts communities in general have a sort of a dramatic difference in community, in the interest in community service across the board than there was, say, even 10, 15, 20 years ago. And in particular of a dramatic decrease in the sort of person that I was just described. Somebody who actually has some ability to work within the realm of the board that we'd be asking, whether it's personnel or whether it's finance or whether it's obviously the open space or whether it's community housing or all the other boards and committees we have in town, right? So when you ask Dorianne, why can't we fill? I think that the candidate pool has dramatically shrunk. In some cases to where it's hard to see that there is one, to be honest with you. And again, I'm talking about people that, could actually make the board, this board, any board, incrementally better for joining than just neutral or worse.
I've lived in town for 30 years and I've never seen such a lack of volunteerism. The number of openings on boards, people not wanting to work. And there has to be another reason. I can't imagine that people who live in a community like this, that we have a very tight-knit community. There's another factor at play here. There has to be. I can't believe that people don't want to volunteer to help their town. I've never seen it in 30 years. So
yeah, listen, I didn't want to suggest there wasn't. I was just saying, I think you're right about that. But I don't know the answer to that. That's the point.
okay.
The sort of it's like a graph that goes like this, just each day, each week, each month, each year, the community-minded people become harder and harder to identify.
Well, I'd like to see us stay at 5. If any one of us gets sick or any one of us is not able to make it, I mean, obviously I'm in Disney World right now. I have no problem making a meeting, but if we drop to just 3 and there's just the 3 of us, if one of us doesn't make it and we're struggling so much with the pool, personnel board won't be able to meet, which now that means the employees aren't represented. So we have to find an answer to how to fill these 2 seats, and to me personally, we should be staying at 5. My concern is the employees. I don't think 3 of us, well, the 3 of us, we're great, we'll meet, that's not an issue. But what if one of us gets sick and we can't meet and we can't fill the, any other seats? We're gonna be in trouble. So we should be staying at 5. That's just my opinion.
All right, thank you.
John?
I think the the atmosphere in this country, never mind Southborough, but in this country right now, with all the turmoil in politics and whatnot, even in little small towns like us, we've had some turmoil. People shy away from wanting to get involved in that, and I think that's the crux of the problem we're facing in getting volunteers. I agree with Dorianne that with just 3 of us, one can't make it. It's going to be a scheduling problem for Vanessa, but I have no problem with three versus 5, but it could, with just 3, it can present a real scheduling problem, and it's been a scheduling problem right along. Have to ask who can make it and who can't make it, and I think the Zoom has been a good answer, because wherever we are, we seem to be able to get on Zoom.
Yeah, can you imagine that the whole, the volunteerism problem we just were talking about? Can you imagine that without Zoom?
There wouldn't be any.
We probably wouldn't be here in this meeting right now, to be completely honest.
And
So-
I don't like Zoom. The main reason I don't like it is I want to be sitting next to you so I can read your feelings.
No, I think you're onto something there, and that's not the topic of the conversation right now, but Zoom giveth and Zoom taketh away, right? I think, bear with me for a second here. The ability to meet remotely, has become the norm, even when people theoretically could meet. And, that in and of itself is part of our problem. I think people just feel like it's more esoteric, it's more, it's not as concrete as it used to be to actually get in a room and run the town. And so interest becomes less, because the less you have to do to invest yourself in it, for some perverse reason, the less interesting it seems, and the less likely you're gonna be like, oh, you know what, whatever, okay. You will hear this from me again, if anybody ever has what I consider the crazy notion of doing town meetings remotely. I'll never support it for the same reason. Anyway, I that's for a second.
So for purposes of moving this discussion along, we're not voting on anything today. We're not even bringing a proposal forward. What I wanted to do is make sure that we understood what role Paul wants to play or not play, because I realize he has a delicate balance between being our appointing authority, and then obviously he oversees town meeting and has a lot of views, sometimes even that we don't see of the people he's interviewing. So I think our general message, if I could summarize it, is we'd strongly support if you can find a way to round us out to 5. That seems to be the easiest path forward in terms of what we think is the best answer for Southborough. I realize it's not the easiest path forward in terms of time at this point.
I would, yeah, I'll just reiterate that I would say if it came to it, I trust the instincts of the 3 members on this call, Dorianne and John and you, Jason. And if, if I were asked, or if it became a public issue and people were curious about where I stand on it, that's what I would tell them. And that I don't have, and therefore, I, substantially defer to the sensibilities of the people on the board, who know best, what ability the board has to function like.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, forget what I was gonna say. Oh, Ed, Mark, used to be like a sign-up sheet at Katie's desk there for people that wanted to do things in town. Does that still exist?
Yeah, we still have, people can still submit forms and, showing their interest in whatever community, whatever boards or committees they might want to serve on, and we keep those on file, so when we do have vacancies, we can go back to those.
Yeah, but isn't that, well, where is it advertised? On the town website? The openings?
We do put it out on the town website, we put it out on social media, we circulate it to the departments, just, in case anyone's aware of anyone that, might be interested.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
nobody,
The last thing I'd say to the three folks on the board is that my philosophy of trying to find people that add to the board and are good to work with and willing to serve and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is out of deference and regard for the three of you and all the people who came before you. So, I'm not going to ask for an answer to this question, but I think ultimately it comes down to what's more important, right? And it's all important, but is it more important to have five? Is five of anybody better than three really good people, right? And that's a hard question to answer. I'm not asking anybody to answer it on this call, but that's sort of what I struggle with these days. Anyway,
I think, the towns and whatnot, I remember back in my day when the board of selectmen used to be three. And they went to five. I know as a department head working, I found it a lot easier and a lot better to work with three rather than five. But
Yeah, I think there's some pros and cons, right? Five will certainly bring greater diversity of thought, but are all five members fully vested in the mission of whatever board you're talking about, whether it's personnel board or otherwise? So, yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. It seems easy on the surface, but I think we have some time. But we're gonna have some amendments to the bylaw at town meeting, right? This is one we could, deliberate and discuss up until obviously the closing, I guess the closing of the language needing to be in the warrant of whether we want to go forward. But my expectation is that obviously if we can find great members to join us, that seems like that would be the biggest win. And if we can't and we continue to struggle and we start to have issues even holding meetings, then I think we need to continue to re-engage in this. That would be what how I would close out the short term, unless anyone disagrees with that. Then I want to make a longer term comment for discussion.
I would agree with you, Jason. My concern is if any of us get sick or we can't make a meeting, there is no meeting and that's going to affect our employees. So what is the best answer to protecting our employees? And how do we manage that?
Right. Well,
And I don't know what to do.
yeah, in that isolated example, right, having a lower quorum threshold would allow a meeting to continue, right, and without that one member. But again, then you have essentially two people making decisions on very important topics, which has severe limitations you know, at certain times, especially if there's differing opinions of how to approach something. So I think we need to be delicate with this, and we need to just continue to discuss it.
Again, another theoretical question, don't we have to answer it right this second? Are there substantive committees, boards and committees in town today that are just three? I'm not even, off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
No, there's a lot of fives. There's a lot of fives that used to be sevens, if I,
Right,
that's my recollection is.
okay,
So then longer term though, I do believe, you know, it's important for the personnel board to meet with the select board. I can't remember the last time we actually met with the select board. So unless anyone disagrees, I do think we need to have kind of a broader conversation with the select board. Realizing that they are not our appointing authority, but they do control the administrator bylaw, right? And as they look at how they're running town government in setting policy, I do think there's a natural intersection that this conversation warrants a broader discussion. Again, not necessarily a true agenda, but just really kind of see where people are at. What, if anything, we want to study around it. I'm not suggesting another committee, just to be very, very clear. But you know, just there are some people that could probably go off and do some research and bring it back to a public meeting of what are other towns doing, and is what we're doing fit for purpose for what's best for the Southborough residents.
I have
Thoughts
no
around
issue
that?
with that. I have no issue with that.
Fine with meeting with the select board.
Sorry, Dorian, what did you say?
I'm fine with meeting with the select board and trying to find out where they're heading with the town administrator bylaw, if they want to make changes, if they don't. I just don't really have an answer how to fix this situation, so I'm just gonna show up at all the meetings. I'll work around them best I can.
All
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Good,
the
Bob.
more heads thinking about this issue, the better.
Anything else on this topic for today? Paul, any parting comments before we go to our next agenda item?
Only that when I said how great everybody looked earlier, I was not including Mark.
Poor
No,
Mark.
guys, I appreciate your having me around.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll keep you involved in the discussion as we move forward.
Yes, please, and I will follow up with my candidate.
Thank you.
All right,
Happy
Thank you.
holidays, Paul.
thanks, guys.
Bye. All right, next agenda item 4A, discussion of existing employee salary structure, review future action items. So I believe this was Mark and Vanessa to start, and then the board to weigh in.
Sure. So we've gone back out to all of our comp communities, specifically about the business administrator position, to try and gather their FY26 data to see where our ranges fall with what the actual pay rates will be and what anticipated COLA increases will be. We're also asking for those job descriptions from those communities to make sure, we're looking at, apples and apples, that things are really what we anticipate by title in other communities. So we didn't have enough data to pull together to put in the packet today, but we're making return calls to all of those communities this week.
So you expect we'll be able to have a substantive conversation about that in January of
Yes.
where we want to or not want to go with that particular job. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. Discussion of FY26 funding. I think this is just in a procedural one we talked about and voted at the last meeting. Albeit it wasn't a unanimous vote. We talked about how we wanted to adjust the grid for what I'll call the COLA piece. I think we landed on a 3%. that has now been updated and included in our packet. So I think you are looking for a vote to approve that
Yes.
grid as it stands.
Mhm.
Before we do a vote on that, was there any feedback from the departments when Brian or Mark, I forget whether Brian or Mark distributed the grid, just general feedback from anyone?
Not to me personally. I'll leave that to Mark and Brian if they have any comment.
I don't recall any specific comments on that, no.
Okay. Okay. Then I will move that we approve the FY26 grid as presented in the packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? I will add one thing for discussion. I think this obviously should be part of the overall town budgetary conversations, right? And obviously we reserve the right to come back to this, you know, as part of those discussions with, you know, we don't run the budget. We don't have any oversight over the budget, but obviously this impacts the budget. So, this is, we're doing what our part is to make a recommendation based on what we had in front of us. All right, roll call vote. John,
I got a question.
go ahead.
So adopting this grid, it gives them a total of 5%.
As long as they get a satisfactory performance rating. Or are not at the top step, which I believe there's no situations like that other than one. So, any further discussion? All right, roll call. John,
Aye.
Dorian,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Next is potential revisions to the FY26 SAP. Vanessa, are you aware of any yet?
So what we're preparing for the next meeting is we're having some conversation about two of the stipends, which have not been adjusted in many years. One is veterans agent and one is tree warden. So I'm working with Mark and Brian to pull that together as a proposal for your next meeting. Other than the grid, I wanted to just reach out to the board again and see if you had any suggested amendments that you wanted me to prepare for the track changes version of next month's packet.
I will answer that in a second, but I have a question on what you said. The tree warden, is that a union or a non-union employee? I realize it could be either, but currently is it
Sure.
held
Currently, it is Chris Leroy in the DPW, so a union position.
it's not on the agenda, so I'm just gonna hold my commentary on that. And we can bring that to another meeting. But I think when we do our agenda for January, we should specifically call out the positions we're gonna talk about related to stipends, like not just say stipends on the agenda, so.
Yes.
Okay, in terms of other items, I would like a discussion next time related to how we start our employees on vacation. Cause, you know, in terms of, are we still in the right spot, or do we continue to have this situation where almost every new employee that comes forward, you know, is being granted an exception? I just think we need to revisit the language there and see if it can or should be adjusted, and debate it then. And then the other item that I think we just need to do, so the other item that I think is a good practice is, obviously there's a ton of employees on this phone call right here or the Zoom right now. I would request that someone, whether it's you or Mark, send an email out to the employees and say, we are going to start locking down language for the FY26 SAP. Please, if there's any items that you would like the personnel to review, please submit this by early January so that they can have a discussion, including the rationale behind it. And then whoever submits it obviously should be willing to come forward, right? And speak to why they're suggesting it. So that would be one thing. I am aware that the town clerk does have some items for us to consider. So I will get you what provisions that we'll be discussing for January. And I know he's willing to come and speak to those as well.
Okay, thank you.
But I would say overall, my current assessment, unless the employee reach out generates a different discussion, is very minor procedural items are how I would assess where we're at for the substance of the language headed to the annual town meeting. Okay. John, I see your hands up.
Yeah. And I think I've spoke to this a couple of times, but I think Mark is in a position now, or the town is in a position where we get into, well, he should be getting into a position where he has some stance in a bidding war of new employees who are coming in at a higher rate than what the old guy went out at. And I was looking at the bylaw, the Mark's bylaw, and you get, do you even want to be able to bid, or you know, it's just getting like the Major League Baseball, for crying out loud. You get a candidate coming in, and one town will give them 10,000 and the other will only give them 9, and you know, isn't there, what step could we take, Mark, if you know, everybody else wants to do it, to put you in a position that you can negotiate a little?
So we can't talk, it's not specifically on the agenda. So Mark, I'm not gonna let you answer that. But what we will do is we can add that as, you know, potential language for how do we address that. But I will say, this goes back to my comment I previously made, is this is a broader conversation than I think just the personnel board can have. And I think this is part of that select board discussion that I'm proposing as well, because it goes part and parcel with one thing we control and one thing we don't control. But it's a very good comment, John. I just can't allow back and forth on it today. All right. Are there any other items that personnel board members would like to see a discussion of for potential action on the FY26 SAP?
I didn't really take a deep look at it, so
Okay.
I can make a comment on that, right?
So my homework for all of you would be that prior to, like, you know, by early January, if you could just let Vanessa know if you'd like an agenda item around a particular section. That way we call out the sections that we're planning to discuss on our agenda at our January meeting.
Okay. Homework written.
All right. Anything else on that topic?
Nope.
All right. Is there any other business for today from members of the board? Okay, in terms of calendar, I'm gonna have Vanessa do a poll via email with a few potential dates in mid-January, so get well beyond the new year for our meeting. I think we have one public holiday after New Year's in MLK in the middle of the month, so we'll obviously work to avoid that as well. Any general objections other than knowing the dates to like a Monday or a Friday, if we propose some around then?
I'm fine with any day of the week.
Okay. All right. All right, with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All right, roll call vote. Dorian,
I.
John,
Aye.
and I am as well. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank
Take
you,
care, everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Aye.